Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Safari. Today we're going to be talking about Weapons. Weapons was directed by Zach Greger, who also directed Barbarian, and he produced Companion earlier this year. Both films also did very well, and we'll get more into those later in comparison with Weapons. This past weekend, Weapons opened alongside Freakier Friday and Sketch, and it grossed about 42 million in its opening weekend. Actually, uh, opening weekend predictions were raised because it was doing so well, which is great to see. It has a all-star cast. It really has a great cast, headed by Josh Brolin, Julia Garner, Alden Ehrenreich, just a whole cast that's really good, and they did really well in the film, I thought. So today to talk with me about it is Spencer, who has seen the film, so he has a lot of thoughts about it. There might be some spoilers in the film, so if you haven't seen it yet, stop watching now, come back after you see it, but definitely recommend the film. So Spencer, I'm excited to hear about your
Yeah,
thoughts on the film.
let's dive in. Well, to start, I've seen both Barbarian and Companion, and I think between the three movies, Weapons, Companion, and Barbarian, I think I like Barbarian the best of the three. And I say that with a question mark because, look, here's the thing. I am a very picky movie person. I feel like a lot of stuff that I see, I'm very disappointed in, and overall, those three movies for me were not as exciting as I wanted them to be. But I think of the three, Barbarian gave me the most surprise in terms of the actual storyline and what was happening. With Weapons, I have two really big issues with Weapons, and the first one is the runtime. I think the runtime is just a little too long for me because it's over 2 hours long for a horror movie, and I think that we start to get the point of the movie and it starts to just kind of repeat itself quite often. And so I didn't. That was my big thing with it. I think there's really great writing. I think there's some really great performances. I think there's a really cool twist, which I'm sure we're going to spoil at some point during this episode. So that's why we have that spoiler warning already. And so I thought there's some really great moments. And I think what frustrated me the most is that I was missing the why of this movie. And I think, like, for me, I guess this is my spoiler here. So get ready because I'm spoiling it. The character of the aunt character, who kind of was like the whole, like, kind of what's that word? Kind of like the starting point of everything happening. Unless I missed it, I don't remember why she was a character. I don't remember what her purpose was for doing what she was doing. To me, I think that I was watching this. I was like, oh, this stuff is really cool and, like, it's really interesting. It's really kind of weird. It's kind of wild. But why is this? And I don't remember, unless I missed it, I don't remember there being a lot of the why, which is what I was missing from this movie, is why is this happening? I understood what was happening. I understood this was like a weird, like, jump scare kind of whatever. And I haven't seen Barbarian in a while, so Barbarian might not have had a lot of a why either, but I'm pretty sure there was a sick and twisted why as to why everything was happening. But in Weapons, for me, the hardest thing for me to pick up on was just why this aunt was connected and why she was doing this and why this was all taking place. Why was it happening at this time? Why was it happening here? And I think that I would have loved just a why to really solidify this movie for me. Like, there were a lot of great moments, and I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I saw it. I would say for people that are interested in seeing it, if you want to see it, I recommend you see it. Still, don't take my opinion for. I tell people this all the time. Like, no matter what movie it is, whether I liked it or whether I didn't, if you feel like you're going to like the movie, go see it. If you feel like you're not going to like the movie, don't go see it. It's really kind of on you. I'm not. Don't take my opinion as the opinion of whether or not to see this movie, because there are movies that I really like that people don't. There's movies that I don't like that people do, and as someone with a degree in movies, I feel like I'm also, or a degree in film, I feel like I'm also very picky about everything, because a lot of times I can't see the movie for just the art. I see it for a lot of the technical stuff too, and so for me, Weapons, like, while it was a very interesting script, very compelling performances, and I think a lot of what it did actually kind of push some boundaries in terms of storytelling and in terms of, like, what's happening, especially with, like, kidnapping children. Pretty interesting We don't really do that a lot in movies, and I think that I love the boundary pushing, and I think it's rated R, and I don't think it held back on the gore and the violence, which I think was really interesting and really wonderful to watch. But the whole time, and like again, like the first like hour and 30 minutes, I was like, okay, this is cool. I can't wait to see why this is happening, or like what's going on, and what was the catalyst. That's what I was looking for. What was the catalyst for all of this? And then we see the catalyst, but then the catalyst is never explained to, at least for me, as to why. And the catalyst being the aunt, as to why she was doing all of this stuff. And so for me, that was the biggest thing, where I was like, this could easily have been like such a really wonderful, like flawless movie, but to me that just is a big like mark on why I didn't like it so much, and that con really outweighs a lot of the pros for me. And so that's the biggest thing. But I think that if you look at Barbarian Companion and Weapons in terms of a whole, that cinematography and that filmmaking style and that style of horror genre, I think each of them are all consistently similar in terms of the style, which I think for someone who really is a big fan of that style, you'll really eat this movie up and will really enjoy this a lot. I think that for me, it was just really the biggest things for me were the length and the why.
I definitely agree with that. Overall, like, I'm not a huge horror fan, but I did like Barbarian a lot. I also haven't seen it in a while. I don't think I've seen it actually since it was in theaters.
Same.
But I do remember, like, it scared me because I get scared very easily. But I do remember coming out and being like, I was horrified, but it was a well-made movie, and I enjoyed it, even though like it scared the shit out of me. Weapons, I will say that overall I did like it. I thought the performances were excellent. A lot of the cinematography, some of the shots they did were really cool. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember, like, there were some scenes for like the shots they did where like they kind of panned the camera. And I was talking about this with someone else. I don't know if it was intentional or if maybe it was intentional. They would like pan to like when the drug addict guy, I don't remember his name, when he was like in the house or the warehouse, the camera panned to like the attic, like ceiling above him, mm-hmm. like you thought it was going to be a jump scare, then nothing happened. And they did that a few times throughout the movie, which I thought was kind of cool because you expected something that didn't come. Also, I do agree with like the aunt, and I feel like at least for me watching it, we kind of, like in my mind, I kind of knew why like she like took all the kids and then controlled the parents. They never really explained it, but it kind of, just watching it, you kind of like put it together about why she was doing it. But at the same time, they never explained like why she specifically came to their town to do it. Maybe it was because like in wherever she's from, like she already did there and like killed everyone, and so she had to come here. I don't know. They never really explained that, which I agree would have definitely helped the story. Also, for me personally, I would have liked to see like the rest of the parents from the class, because 17 kids disappeared, and Josh Brolin was like really the only parent who got was like, where are our kids? Gotta go find them. No one else really cared. And I love the cameo of Justin Long as one of the parents, just coming in for like 2 seconds and leaving. I thought that was a great little moment. But I would have loved to see more of the parents actually get involved beyond that like first scene in like the meeting at the school.
I agree with that. I actually think I would have almost loved to have seen this as a mini-series and seen like each episode is a different take on like the parent and like even not if we don't see all the parents, but like each different parents. Because what was interesting about this movie, another thing that kind of for me worked on occasion, was the parents were so mad at the teacher, thinking that the teacher kidnapped these children, but then they never really go into any like, well, let's think about this for a second. Maybe it's not the teacher. It was just like, well, she did it, and like there was no changing their minds on anything. And then you get Josh Brolin, who is like, well, hold on, maybe it wasn't her. So maybe that, I mean, maybe that's like why that was one of the parents that was singled out, because that was a parent who was willing to listen and maybe like actually go based off research and facts versus feelings, in terms of like what's going on, because that, and then like, but I also thought it was interesting that like, if the aunt wasn't actually, I mean, I guess like the aunt is related to Alex, but if the aunt wasn't related to Alex and was kind of like what you're saying is kind of just kind of coming into this town, why did she choose Alex over all the other kids to like be the one who quote unquote survives and doesn't? And then also, like, this is a big spoiler because this is like the end of the movie. Josh Brolin's character, his child, he finds his child, but it's like, they're like, and then all the children, after a while, they started to regain consciousness and like know who they are again. They were able to talk after a year, and I was like, oh, so these children are like completely scarred for life, even though like the spell was broken. But is the spell broken because they still because Alex broke the stick with the hair and went after the aunt, but didn't take off all the other hair from the stick. So this is such a small nitpicky thing, but all the other hair was still on the stick. So does that mean that everyone else is still under this curse or under this hex or this charm or whatever? Or because there's now a new piece of hair that's like the new one? Because she takes it, when she puts it in the water, they stop doing the thing. But he never put it back in the water. So are they setting up for a possible sequel? That's another question that I was kind of interested in. But I think one of the biggest things for me that I really loved, we mentioned cinematography, but like I thought the shot design was really cool. I thought the way that it was all done, and like you're talking about the attic, like going up to the attic, like expecting jump scares, then there's not. But then in moments where you're not expecting it and it happens, I think there's some really great redirections and misdirects in this movie that I think are really what kept me intrigued for a lot of the movie. Because at one hand, it's really a very simple story in a way, but it becomes more complex based on how, and I think this is great for the writing, the directing, and like a lot of the below the line crew and how it was created, because it could have gotten, and I will say this, wasn't a fan of, it wasn't my favorite movie or anything. I wasn't really necessarily bored at any point during the movie, because I was still trying to figure out the why, and I was trying to, kind of see that, but I think it got very complex with how it told the story, and I think that this story could easily be we've seen this story, not like this story specifically, but this type of story we've seen all the time, and I think that the way that this was made was such a unique and interesting way that there were some incredible creative ways that this filmmaking team and this creative team made it work so it wasn't the same story over and over. I think that was really interesting to me too. I will say the one thing though is that I always like a red herring in a movie, and I think what was interesting is all the parents are blaming the teacher when in reality this aunt who out of nowhere shows up and is the villain of the story, there's no like beating around the bush with her. It was like she's the villain and that's what it is, and there was no like that was the twist, is that she shows up and like she's doing all this weird like hex voodoo whatever. But other than that, you're expecting there to be like, like in a lot of horror movies, it's like you expect, oh, it's obviously an old man down the street, but it's not. It's actually like the best friend, because that's what you're expecting in a horror movie like this. And so it was interesting to me that the thing was what was the oddity of it all was this aunt coming in, and she was the thing. She was the problem. So it was interesting to me how they didn't really make it like a secret, quote unquote secret twist. It was like, oh, this is the lady that's coming. I will say one of the really wonderful moments for me that I really loved it was at night. Julia Garner, her character, the teacher, she's sitting in the car trying to spy on the house, and then she falls asleep. And I don't know if it was the aunt or if it was the mom that the aunt was forcing, came to the door of the car and tried to open the car door and couldn't get it open, and then walked around to the back of the car, opened the car door and cut her hair. For me, it was such a cool moment because it was such a simple moment, but it was told so elegantly, and that's one of the moments that stands out for me because it created tension when it was really like, oh, they're just trying to, I was like, oh, are they about to like, do the scissors, and then the parents stabbing themselves with the scissors in the face, or the fork in the face. There were some really great moments that I think the way they were told were such simple moments on paper, but on screen there was such complexity to it, and I really liked the way that a lot of that happened. So it's hard. It's hard for me to be like, I didn't like this movie or I love this movie, because I was missing a lot of that why. And I think for me that why was super important. But as a whole, as a whole, I really think that the movie has a lot of great moments and a lot of great like redeeming qualities and a lot of great facts that are so great to see on screen, and some cool unique things that, like I said, if it's a movie that you are super interested in, definitely see it, because it's probably a target. There's a target audience who will really enjoy it and be like, this is like might be their top movie of the year. I know I talked to a couple of friends who saw it. Actually, I had a friend text me today. He saw a couple movies, including Weapons, and he's like, "Weapons was so good, one of the best movies I've seen all year." And I was like, "We should talk about this." But also, I mean, again, if you look at my Letterboxd top 4, it's massively wild, because it's Singing in the Rain, Whiplash, Akeelah and the Bee, and Good Burger. So I mean, I like a lot of things and I don't like a lot of things. I know that, like, for me, I'm a Whiplash stan. Like, I love Whiplash so much, and I know there's some people who are like, it's so overrated, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. You didn't like it as much as I did, and like I said, that's okay. For me, Zach Cregger, I think, is a really unique and interesting directing style, and I think it's almost an acquired taste. And I think what's interesting is I think is interesting that he's doing, I think is really brilliant that he's doing, actually. I'm going to just go on a tangent about him real quick, because I think he started out doing like comedies, and then like he was in comedies, and then he became this like director of horror. And I think Barbarian, and then as we mentioned, he produced Companion, but his directing of Barbarian and Weapons, I think Barbarian is actually more like aesthetically accessible than Weapons is, and I think that's very smart, because he took something that was a little bit more mainstream marketability, even though it was, you know, a little aesthetic and a little wild and a little weird and wacky. And I won't spoil Barbarian, because we're not talking about Barbarian. But I thought that was really interesting and unique. And then Weapons was a little bit more like, oh, this is really aesthetic, this is really wacky and bonkers. That I think he was very smart in, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I think he was very smart in making like his first movie a little bit more mainstream and palatable, so people who are going in without any knowledge of any of his other previous work or anything like that are able to be like, oh, okay, Barbarian has this accessibility, and then they go see Weapons, and now they've kind of had this, like, I feel like I'm glad that I saw Weapons after seeing Barbarian, and to a lesser extent Companion, because I feel like I'm understanding his style a little bit more. So aesthetically, I wasn't thrown off by the aesthetic of the movie from the start. I was already going in knowing, oh, it's going to be similar to the Barbarians of the world or the Companions of the world. So I know not to expect a traditional horror movie. I know to expect something a little bit more aesthetic and a little bit more wild, which I think there are a lot of directors that do that, like Jordan Peele, Ari Aster. I think a lot of them created their like mainstream movie, at Robert Eggers, like their big like mainstream, like their for the most part their least aesthetic movie first, to get people hooked and get people engaged, and then they started to make kind of like the movies they wanted to make, which were a little bit more aesthetic. And so once you pick up on, essentially, like, it's kind of like a wine or a beer, like the acquired taste, once you pick up on the acquired taste of this director's filmography, they're going to start getting like more aesthetic and more weirder, but they are going to be something that you enjoy if that's like your director type. And so for me, I was glad that I was introduced into Barbarian before seeing Weapons. So if you're not sure if this is a movie for you, I'd highly recommend watching Barbarian and then going back and watching Weapons, just because of the aesthetic. And I could be wrong. I mean, people who are listening to this could be like, actually, Weapons is way more accessible than Barbarian. But I think Barbarian leans itself into a traditional horror movie and then gets a little bonkers towards the end. But Weapons starts out pretty bonkers already. I mean, like in the first couple of minutes of the movie, the kids are gone. Like they go pretty quick. And then it's also so this is what I also found interesting about this movie is I was kind of really digging it at one point, because of the perspective. It's like, okay, this is this character, and then it cuts to the next character, and we see like kind of where that scene ends is where the other one kind of picks up, of where we're like, oh, this is like with the principal running to the gas station trying to attack Julia Garner's character, the teacher. I was like, oh, what happened? His face is all messed up. What happened? And then later we see that character, and we see the events leading up to that moment, and we're like, oh, this is... So then I was like, oh, this is why that character is doing this. And so when I go back to the why, I think there's a lot of why in there that I picked up on as far as like, oh, this is why this character is doing this, because they're kind of showing it almost in a, I feel like it's in a pretty nonlinear order, but it still feels pretty linear because of I'm seeing everything I need to get. The biggest thing I didn't get was I think there's just a scene missing of why the aunt is there. Why is she doing this? Why is this happening? I think everything else is like I can pick up on it, right? Like, oh, cutting the hair. I picked up, oh, she needs the hair for whatever, the ritual or whatever. Oh, the kids in the basement or whatever. But it was just a lot of like you were saying, like why this place? Why her? Why this place? Why that family? Why this? Is she actually really? Then she's just kind of crazy. Is she an alien? Is she, because there was the one scene, and this is why I was like, is she an alien? Because there's the one scene where it was at the house and there was like a cloud outline of like a gun at one point. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like very quick and it was never really explained, and I was like, okay. But then I was like, is that something that was picked up on, or that I'm supposed to pick up on as far as like, oh, she's otherworldly, or this is like, or it's like a metaphor for weapons because it was, you know, a gun-shaped cloud or whatever. But then I also think about it in terms of like, you know, the movie's 2 hours and 8 minutes, so it's pretty long for this genre of movie. I would say maybe not, because I think Ari Aster and Robert Eggers have kind of heightened the length of horror movies these days. But what I find interesting is it's always something for me is like on the cutting room floor. You know, they probably filmed stuff that didn't make the movie, and I'm wondering if there's a scene that I might see down the road that if it was plugged in, I'd be like, oh, this is explaining why she's there. This is explaining the why that I'm missing. And it just was like a 2-minute scene that's all I needed to just kind of have everything pieced together. And so that could be why. I also think it's very interesting that Josh Brolin's character, his son was the bully. I thought that was it was like a small little twist, and I think it wasn't really a twist because they show I think his name was Matthew. They show Matthew a lot, but I couldn't really pick up on it until I saw the scene where he was getting bullied, where Alex was getting bullied, and then later on, Josh was like, Matthew, and I was like, oh, that's the kid. I was like, that's him. That's the bully. So I thought it was interesting that we took the storyline and really leaned into the bully. I also think that you had mentioned the drug dealer guy. I actually don't think his character was necessary at all in this movie. I think it was something to kind of add extra elements that I think if we strip it back a little bit, it's not necessary or relevant because it only affects the police officer who now has another subplot. It affects him, and it affects, I guess, the first time we see, I think it was the first time, maybe not the first time, but at least from what I recall, the first time we see the aunt running in the woods, like waving at him. And I just, for me, that was maybe part of the storyline that I could have gone without, was just that beeline, that subplot of this drug dealer and how he relates to everything. It was interesting. It was a cool dynamic, but I don't think it was necessary for the pacing or the actual arc of the story. And maybe I'm missing something there, but I think that was probably unnecessary because I think you already had the cop, and you already had the cop like love triangle, which I also think that this cop could have just been single and not had a relationship in this movie. I think that could have been perfectly fine, and he still has feelings for his ex, which is Julia Garner's character. Because I think that a lot of those characters, like the drug dealer and the wife or the girlfriend, I think they were just very underutilized. And like, especially the wife, like she comes in, she's like, "Where were you? I can't believe you did this," and like never really does anything else in the movie. And so I was like, was that necessary? And so I think, like, looking at it in terms of like that, like maybe cleaning up some of the plot and some of the characters may have really made this movie, like, for me, like sail into like my top 10 of the year. But because I felt like there was just a little extra that I didn't really need, on top of that why, now that I'm like diving into it, that it just didn't quite work for me as much as I wanted it to, or as much as I wanted it to work like it did for Barbarian for me. Or like what really I loved about Companion was a lot of the character relationships that I think we get a lot of those in Weapons, but we also don't get enough of it. Like the dad, the mom, Alex's parents are very underutilized outside of them being part of the like spell. I don't think we see the mom at all do anything. We see Alex's dad pick him up a couple times from school, but other than that, he's like in a trance. And so I would have loved to have more of that relationship too.
it's like in one scene. But yeah, they're very underutilized.
Yeah, but like you're saying with the parents, like again, we see Alex's parents just briefly barely do anything. And so, maybe as I was mentioning, like maybe as a miniseries, it's like a 17 episode miniseries where we see the perspective of one different character each episode, and maybe with weapons, maybe it's interesting. Maybe it's so long because we're trying to get a lot of information in there and we're sacrificing for time that maybe it needed to be a longer movie or a longer format, a longer medium to, because there was what frustrates me is there's so much good stuff in there, so much that works for me, and then just the smaller, like just the things that didn't work for me are just so big.
Yeah, I get
And
that.
it's so frustrating because there's so much good stuff with it. That's what I think for that, because it's just there's so much good stuff to it.
The thing with the aunt, I feel like, cause she's like the mom's sister, I guess. So like, I don't understand like if Alex's mom. I guess my question is like, did she know what the aunt was? Because then would she have like invited her to come live with them? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think and kind of in that regard, I think that's also kind of the why that I'm missing, right? Is like why, and this is the thing, and this is where it's like, this is I think a little bit more of like the possibly intentionally, we don't, it's kind of like up to us, intentionally ambiguous for lack of a better term, because I'm wondering if it's like this aunt, like maybe it's kind of like, I don't want to say this movie because it would spoil it, but let me preface it by saying I think, okay, spoiler for the movie The Visit happening right now. If you don't want to hear that, fast forward like 30 seconds. Here it comes. So for me, I'm wondering if the aunt was truly the aunt, or if it was kind of like a situation. Have you seen The Visit? I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it.
It sounds familiar, but
It's the M. Night
I
Shyamalan
don't
movie
know.
where the kids go visit their grandparents in the wilderness.
I might have, but I feel like there's multiple movies like that, so I don't know, honestly.
All right, well, I'm going to spoil it for you then, too.
That's
But basically what happens is, in that movie, The Visit, it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Visit, they're like, we're going to drop you off at your grandparents' house. And they're like, okay. They don't do a Zoom call or anything with these grandparents. These kids have never met their grandparents. They don't even know what their grandparents look like. They drop them off at the house. They just leave them. And then they're like, let's do a little Zoom or whatever and meet with the grandparents. And then they get on the Zoom and they're like, those aren't your grandparents. And it's just like two crazy people that like escaped from an asylum, murdered the grandparents, and just took over as the grandparents. So I'm almost wondering if... spoiler over for The Visit. Back to weapons. Still weapons spoilers, but I'm wondering if that is kind of what's going on with the aunt. If that kind of similar, that it's just something that's not like outrightly said, but I'm wondering if that's a similar situation to why the aunt is there, or if I mean, it might have been a long lost aunt, and it's like this mom just hasn't seen this aunt in a while. But I'm also curious if the aunt put some kind of spell on the parents prior to arriving, so they didn't even know really what was going on necessarily. That's what I'm wondering. I also really, I gotta say, the grossest thing to me was just eating the cans of soup, like just like, I don't even know if they were cooked or not, but just like sitting there just feeding cans of soup to people who literally
Yeah, I
were
thought
like
that was weird. That
barely
was like
chewing.
one of my bigger questions, like why soup? Like I get maybe
Yeah.
like because they had to get fed still because they're still human, I guess. But like I don't know. I thought that was weird. But,
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think that's what I think with the soup. I think it was because if you look at chicken noodle soup, it's cheap, it's easy, it's got protein because of the chicken. It's got a lot of sodium, but it's got enough of your nutritional daily value. But it's also something like if you put in someone's mouth and they can't really chew it, they can at least swallow it without too much of a hassle. So I think that's kind of, I was intrigued why it wasn't like tomato soup or just like broth versus like something that has chunks in it. But I think that might have been why. I also think it's funny that no character drinks water in this movie like at all. Because that's probably,
'Cause I was
maybe
like,
drink water before
water
you have soup.
doesn't work for me anymore, and I'm like, because I was like, why doesn't? Because I was talking to my friend after we saw it. Why doesn't Alex just like give all the like weapons water? And he's like, yeah, I don't know. But like, cause she said like water doesn't work for me, so maybe water doesn't do anything for them because they're connected to her somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I just that was never explained. I just thought it was awkward. It didn't
Oh
really
yeah.
like affect the overall movie in any way, so it doesn't really matter. But I just thought it was weird.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think what I think is like what is really good about this movie really works for me. But then I think there's just a lot of extra that I didn't need, and I think it kind of muddles it a lot. But I almost feel, and it's tricky because like I have a lot of times I'll see a movie and I don't really like it. People are like, we should watch it again. You just missed a lot. You didn't get it, and I was like, okay, pretty sure I got it. But I'm also like, this is one of those movies where I truly wonder if I need to watch again to kind of process like what I missed the first time, because there was so much happening that like maybe if I watch it again and maybe not watch it on the big screen, maybe I'll, because now I've seen it, I don't have to worry about spoilers. Maybe like if I watch it like once it comes out on VOD, I can watch it on my projector like at my house, just like without any distractions around, and seeing if my opinion changes, if I like it better, if I like it, maybe I'll like it worse. I don't know. But maybe I'll pick up on more stuff and be like, oh, I might not. I might be like, well, I still don't love this movie as much as I thought I would. And I think this is the tricky part because, like, I went like, and I'm going to use this as like an example of Whiplash, right? I love Whiplash so much. I was like, Damien Chazelle crushed it. That movie is so good that everything that Damien Chazelle does now, I'm like, it's going to be so good. It's going to be just as good as Whiplash. And then every time I get disappointed because it's not Whiplash. And so, and like as much as I enjoy the movies, they're just not Whiplash. And so I think that that's the same thing for me, is that like anytime I watch a director's movie and it's like, it's so, like their first movie is so, like knocks it out of the park, that my expectations are now a lot higher. So I'm going in with those higher expectations. So like Weapons was like my number one movie to see of the year. I was like, this is the movie I'm most looking forward to. And it wasn't the most disappointing movie I saw, but it didn't meet my expectations or exceed them. And I think that that's, like, with Final Destination Bloodlines, that movie, my expectations were so low because of how that franchise is very hit or miss. And that is, like, one of my favorite movies of the year. It completely exceeded my expectations. And so I think that with Weapons, maybe because I was so hyped about it, that I was just kind of disappointed by the time I saw it. So maybe I need to go back and watch it with, like, more of, like, an objective view of it and see if, like, okay, what did I like about this movie, and can I lean into what I liked about it, and see if that helps me shape the arc of the story and shape what I really enjoy about it. Because a lot of the moments, like I was mentioning, a lot of the suspenseful moments are so wonderfully done. Like, they just work so well. And for me, it just feels like because of that why that's missing, that one little moment that's missing, makes it a lot harder, because it's such a big thing that's missing to really tie everything together, but all the good parts are so good. It's just the one part that didn't work for me. The one big part that didn't work for me, like I said, really kind of pushes everything else down because it was such a prominent thing that's not working for me.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are like that. They're like with any genre, any director. Like if you see, like I also really love Whiplash, but just any director. Like if you see one of their movies that you love, you're just going to have that high standard going forward, and nothing is going to match that first movie. So I feel like that's like with everyone, though.
Yeah, and that's it, and that's the case. Is like, I've also had it where, and this is the thing where like this is what Zach Cregger's like second directorial feature. That like I think for me, like there have been directors where I'm like, I don't like anything. Ari Aster, you're amazing. I don't like most of Ari Aster stuff. I really loved Midsommar, and that wasn't his first movie. I think it was his second. And then I actually enjoyed Eddington for what it was. I know most people don't even like that one. They're like, it's his least favorite. It's his worst movie. It's not my worst. For me, I really, and this is coming out of someone, and I hate to say this, I really didn't like Hereditary at all. I didn't really like it at all. I didn't think it was interesting for me. And people are like, it's one of the best horror movies of the 21st century and all this stuff. And like, people love that movie so much that when they saw other ones, they were more disappointed. But for me, because the bar was set so low, I started to really come around to Ari Aster's movies because I thought it started to be like really a lot better. I have a couple of other directors that I know that, like, the first movie I was like, it's okay. Second movie, not my thing. But like their third or fourth movie, I was like, this is the movie that I like. And so for me, I know that, like, for me, Zach Cregger, like, I liked Barbarian more than Weapons, but I'm excited to see what he does next because I'm ready for my movie to, like, the next one to, like, knock it out of the park and be like, this is the movie that I want. This is the one that I'm excited about. Because I'm ranking, I think, like, Barbarian would be, like, my second choice. Weapons is my third choice. So what's my first choice? That's what I'm waiting on, is my first choice movie from him. But again, like I said, I preferred Barbarian. I think Barbarian just, the pace goes a little bit quicker, and I think it does a little bit more of the suspense without throwing so much at us. But I think Weapons, like I said, Weapons does a lot of stuff right. And that's what intrigues me about it. Because it does so much right that I have to really just think if I can overlook the stuff that I didn't, and it's not that I did anything wrong. I think that's what I want to be clear on, is that I didn't do anything wrong necessarily. It just left out stuff that I think was really necessary for me as me to be able to resonate with and understand. That maybe someone else did, and a lot of people love it, and that's great. And again, it's not a bad movie by any means. It's just like I've said, it's just frustrating for me as the person I am with the type of movie taste that I have. The things that I'm missing are hard for me to, like, put in my top 10 of the year. It's hard for me to do, but, like, it wouldn't be in my least 10 favorite movies of the year. There's a lot of worse movies that have come out this year. A lot. And this is nowhere near the bottom of movies for me. But it's one of those things where it's just like, for me, the expectation versus the reality versus what I expected. I think what I expected out of it. And I think I got, for the most part, what I expected out of it. But because that twist took such a sharp turn, it wasn't like, oh, this makes sense that this was happening. It's like, oh, okay, she came out of nowhere. What's her deal? Oh, she's doing some witchcraft. Is it witchcraft? Is it? I was like, what is she? I was like, what is she doing? Why is she here? Who is she? And I think that I never got those answers. And for me, I felt like I left with something that was missing. I just left not feeling like I had a complete catharsis. Like I'm still waiting for something to happen.
Yeah. Going back to, like, twists and turns, I think that, like, the thing with Barbarian that was great, it had a great twist with which I'll get to in a second. With Weapons, because in the trailers we all saw that, like, they were all blaming Julia Garner. So, like, I think going into it, everyone knew, like, it's obviously not going to be her because, like, everyone's just, that's all we're seeing in the trailers and marketing. So clearly it's probably not going to end up being her. Or maybe it was, and that would have been, like, the twist. But as soon as the aunt came in, just looking at her, you knew she was going to be the it factor,
Right.
She just had that look about her. Barbarian, I thought had a great because you get Bill Skarsgård kill him off pretty early on in the movie, if I remember correctly, and, like, because everyone assumed he was going to be, like, the bad guy, because he's Bill Skarsgård, and then he got killed pretty fast. And then I thought that was a great twist.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, so Barbarian spoilers. Forgot the spoiler alert on that one, but just be aware that Barbarian spoilers are going to happen now because now we've opened up that can of worms. So what I really thought was interesting about Barbarian is that it was like a one location kind of movie. Truly, this Airbnb or this rental, and a lot of it was like, oh, it feels like something's going to happen. Like they're going to get, like it's got, like, Strangers vibes. Like someone's going to get killed, serial killer's going to come and kill them. And then we discover a magic portal, magic door, whatever. Not magic, but, just a random door that it's like, what is this? And then you're like, oh, this is a whole, like, weird, like, subterranean building, like these walls, these, like, tunnels. And then you're like, oh, that's weird. Oh, there's a whole, like, this is the one where the video cameras are there, right? And they're, like, filming the video camera thing. And it's like, oh, that's weird. And then for there to be, like, a legitimate, like, barbarian thing that is real inside the tunnel, it just got weirder and weirder and weirder, but we kept leaning into it. that it just takes this turn that you're like not expecting, and then it ends, and you're like, great, that was it. That's all I needed, was an hour 40 minutes. With Weapons, it feels like it sets up a lot, and then the payoff just doesn't, like, for me, I was like, oh, it's so obvious it's this person, but it's so out of context of what's happening that, like, honestly, it felt a little Hereditary to me. Anyways, if you know, you know. If you don't, I won't spoil another movie for you. But what I found interesting was, like, Barbarian, I think, knew when to end and how much to give us, and I think Weapons wanted to give us too much, but didn't quite know when to give us what we needed, which I thought was interesting. But I think that once we see, I think what was interesting about Weapons is, like, once we see the twist, like, we're like, oh, she's the twist. There were still smaller things that gave me, like the hair thing, and I was like, if Alex pulls this hair, I know it's going to work so well. How did he get her hair? It was like, also, it was a wig that she was wearing that became her demise, even though she had, like, I was like, so it can be something that she wore. I was like, how does this work? What is the actual logistics of the magic?
I think it was like something, because when he like took all like the name tags at the school, I think it's just something that she just needed something that like a personal item of like the person. So
That's
I guess
right.
it works.
Because I remember in that moment, the teacher was like, Alex, what are you doing in the classroom? And he's like, oh, I just forgot, like, whatever. And she didn't notice that all the name tags were gone from the buckets. I was like, why do you not?
I assumed, because she was looking right at them, so I thought she was going to come in and be like, where are the name tags? But she did, like, it just completely ignored that.
It was just something that it's like, I guess we just didn't notice. But I was like, I was like, or, and this is something else that I thought about. I was like, or she noticed it but didn't say anything, and she's like, this is weird, something's going on, I've got to get to the bottom of this. This is just, and then, because the principal's like, leave him alone, don't go to his house, don't bother him. But, you know, this is something where it's like, it would have made more sense for her to go over and say, hey, this is a weird thing, we got to check in on this. The one thing that really bugged me about the aunt that really pissed me off completely, like, really made me mad, and I get it because she's the villain, is when she goes to the principal, and he's like, you know, we have to go do like a welfare check, and then otherwise we have to call CPS and blah, 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 blah. And she goes into his house and is like, did you call the cops yet? And he's like, well, no, we haven't yet. And then still, like, kills them off. I'm like, they haven't done anything. They literally didn't do anything. Why are you killing them off? I was so mad. Those two innocent men, like, what did they do? They didn't do anything. And literally they hadn't done anything because he already said that they hadn't called the cops or called CPS or anything. So now you look more suspicious. Like, what the heck? That made me so mad. They didn't deserve it.
Definitely. There were, and maybe he is planning to do like a sequel or something, and maybe that's why there was so much stuff in the movie, or maybe it was just a case of trying to do too much in a movie. I don't know, but.
Yeah, and I think it's also, like, I mean, is it my favorite movie I've seen all year? No. Is it my favorite horror movie? No. Is it my favorite Zach Greger movie? No. Did I have a fun time? Sure. I was engaged the whole movie, for the most part. I would say it got a little slow at times just because the movie was a little long. But that's also coming from someone who feels like movies should be 90 minutes, and that's me. I'm pointing at myself. 90 minutes is I feel like 90... maybe 100 for like a really intense movie, but I think like for a horror movie, 2 to 2.5 hours it just feels long. And I know people are gonna at me in the comments or whatever and be like, well, there's this movie and it's so good and it's 2 hours and 12 minutes. Like, sure, there are exceptions to every rule, but it feels like nowadays, and this is not even just to Weapons, it's to like every movie. It feels like nowadays movies are so long. And it's just, they're all just being long for the sake of being long because people are paying so much money and they want to get their money's worth. And, like, I saw some movies recently that were, like, 80 minutes and I was like, perfect, this is exactly what I needed, was an 80-minute movie. But it also makes me think of, like, theater, where a lot of times people that go to, like, live theater, if they're spending $500 on a ticket, they're like, well, I want the show to be long so I can get my money's worth. When I would rather just have something that's good that's short than something that's long and a little overstuffed. And so I think that feels like the mentality now.
Is that sword. Like, you get some people that are like, the tickets are too expensive, and then like they'll buy it anyway, and then they'll be complaining like, oh, the movie's like a 2 hour and a half movie. It's too long. So I don't know, like, because I also work at a movie theater, so like,
yeah.
but so yeah, you can't please anyone these days.
Right, and that's the
But
thing is,
I think, especially with horror movies, it is not being like a huge horror fan. I haven't watched like a ton of horror movies, but the ones I have watched, like it is the type of genre where it is good to have a shorter movie because you don't for a horror movie. I feel like it's more about like the scares, the gore, and that's what horror fans want to see and what I guess they're expecting
Yeah.
in most cases. And they don't really go to see a horror movie to get like the really in depth, like you still want a story obviously, but like
Right.
you don't need like the in depth like 2 hour character development. You still need some of that obviously to make a good movie, but like you don't need as much of it as other genres.
right, and I also think, like, even going off of that, like, I mean, one of my favorite horror movies of the year is Hard Eyes. I know people are going to be mad about that, but for me, Hard Eyes was just so great because it was 90 minutes. I got the gore, I got the story, I got relationship. It was written to be like this cheesy horror comedy drama, whatever. Like it was so fun. It was so quick. It was so I got everything I needed as like a fan of horror movies. And I think what's interesting is I want to break this down because when I say I'm a fan of horror, it also speaks to the question of like what type of horror am I a fan of? Because Weapons is not a horror movie in the sense of like a slasher movie. It is a horror movie in the sense of a psychological horror.
Yeah.
And for me, psychological horrors, or like what I call aesthetic horrors, are not necessarily my favorite genre because I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of scares. I'm getting what it's trying is aiming for a lot more suspense and a lot more character relationship and story than it is the quick and dirty. And something like Hard Eyes, I think, works very well because it's got that quick and dirty, but there's also a story to it. And so it doesn't focus on, like, whereas, like, I love the Saw movies. I love them to death. Most of the Saw movies are based on how wacky can these deaths be. And, like, it's all about that. But that's why Saw 10 works so well, is because Saw 10, certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. I was really hoping for supporting actor nomination for Tobin Bell. But it worked so well because it was focused on the story first and the gore second, but still gave me the luscious, excellent gore that I got from the other movies, but I also got a story with it. And so I think, and like Bloodlines did the same thing. Like Final Destination, a lot of those movies were just about like killing off people and chopping them up and doing all this. And then in Bloodlines, it's like, oh, this family has to work together to like kind of save themselves and their heritage and their lineage and all this stuff from. And so it like felt like it was working towards a story and working towards a goal versus just throwing out the shock factor. And so I think that that's what really works. But I think a lot of the aesthetic horrors for me, what I miss a lot of is I get so much character relationship, so much character development, so much story, which is great. I don't get a lot of the shock factor. And like when I do, it's like one big shock that happens at once, which is great. But for me, I would love to have more of a shock factor, even in the psychological horrors. But then I also understand that there's a difference between psychological horror and the like quick and dirt. Like they're different genres. So, if you love psychological horror, you'll probably love Weapons. If you don't like psychological horror, you probably maybe won't. I don't know. Maybe you will. But I think also with like something like Weapons, I think they're like Freakier Friday Weapons. I'm just gonna pull up Freakier Friday because I saw a double feature with Weapons on Freakier Friday, so it's an interesting double feature. But with Freakier Friday, I'm pretty sure that 98% of the audience is going to be people who already planned on seeing Freakier Friday. Maybe a couple percent of people that are just getting dragged because someone wants to go or whatever, or they're like, oh, it's got good reviews, I'll go see it. Weapons is a little different. I think that Weapons is probably going to be about the same, where people who already want to see Weapons are going to see Weapons, and people who don't really know what that movie is, you might get a couple people who read about it and go, oh, this sounds interesting, the reviews are good, I've heard some good things, I'll go see it. But if people aren't already a fan of that genre, or a fan of Zach Kreger, or a fan of, whatever, it's not going to necessarily bring more people into the theater, because a lot of people don't necessarily want to see something and spend $20, as we were talking about, if they're not sure if they're going to like it. Because, I have A-List, so, like, I'm thankful for A-List, because that really helps me get a lot of stuff seen. But, like, if I'm spending $23 on a movie, and I don't like it, it's rough. But then also $23, well, I can just wait for it to come on Blu-ray and buy it for $23 and own it. And then if I like it, I can watch it again and again and again. And if I don't like it, if I buy it early enough, I can probably resell it for like $20 or $15 or whatever. And so I think that's the tricky part, and that's why it's hard. Because I mean, when I was a kid, I would go see a movie in theaters, and I'd have to wait like 8 months for it to get released on DVD, or like VHS even. So when I would see a movie, if I wanted to see it, I have to go see it a couple times in the theaters to see it again, or wait sometimes almost a year to get, like when they had holiday movies back in the day. If you saw a movie in like Elf, I remember like Elf or like whatever, like it would be released in November, but then it wouldn't come out on DVD until the following holiday season because you could watch it so like it wouldn't come out in like February like they do now, where it's like, oh, a couple months later I can have it for the holiday. I had to wait a whole year to see it, and we didn't have all these streaming services, we didn't have all this stuff, so everything was like very unicorn, like it was very rare to find because we didn't have all these services to watch it. It was either in the theater or I had to buy it on DVD or VHS. And so I think that that's what was interesting is like now we have so much access to streaming that a lot of times people are like, well, I don't want to spend $23 on the movie if I can rent it for $20 and have a whole group of friends over and we all pay $5 each to watch this movie on a projector, which I've done. And I think that it's also tricky because I try to go as much as I can to theaters, and it's tricky with A-list because I'm like, A-list, am I really supporting independent theater by using A-list? But I think the movies still get the money. I don't know how that all works out. I don't know I'm not worried about finances. I really am not. I don't care what AMC's finances. Like, just let me use my A-list. But we're seeing this trend where something like this, like Weapons, right, is I would say it's like a mid-size movie. It's an independently produced movie, but it's not like a major movie, and but it's not like so indie. Like something like Architecton, which I saw the other day, where there was like a G-rated movie about architecture, probably in like 4 theaters, and it's not going to get much wider. It didn't even do well there, which cinematography, incredible. But Weapons is kind of in this middle realm where it's not so indie, but it's also not so mainstream. So we're looking at these kind of movies to see how that film model is going, and like theater model, and like, are these movies able to sustain a life in theaters? Because you've got your Freakier Fridays and your Thunderbolts and your, all these big movies that are going to do well because they're big movies. And then you've got your mid-tier like directors who we know about, who have had like a big hit, and then everything else has been kind of like medium to rocky or whatever things there are. And then you've got your like super indie movies that, unless they pick up a lot of awards steam, they may never get seen in more than a couple of theaters. And so really, I'm looking at, like, people are like trying to make sure like independent theater stays intact, and it's like we have to make sure that stays intact. But until we can keep that intact, we've got to keep this mid-tier intact, because if the mid-tier is not staying intact, then it's gonna not help anything below that. Because if people aren't seeing mid-tier movies, why would they see independent stuff? And so I think that's like all these big blockbusters and all these big movies that we know are going to do well. And even then, some of them flop, because a lot of times, I think right now we're in the age of like, we don't need sequels, we don't need prequels, we don't need follow-ups, we just want something good, unique, and original, and fun and exciting. And I think the thing is, I also know that it's a lot of quality versus quantity. Right now, there have been times where I haven't seen stuff like, I have 4 movies per week on A-list, and sometimes I go see like 6 movies in a week. And there are some times where I haven't seen everything in the week that's come out, because so much is just coming out that I have to pick and choose. And then I pick, Freakier Friday and Weapons over the one movie that was only playing for a week, and then I missed it because it was only at like 12 p.m. the next week, and I couldn't go at 12 p.m. And so I think that the problem is we're churning out so much that a lot of times we're not thinking about the quality of something. And I think that it's quantity over quality right now, which I guess to an extent, if we're trying to get people to come back to theaters, that's one thing. But I would much rather have 10 quality movies than 30 movies that exist, because I have A-list and I use it a lot, but I'm going to see 4 movies because I have it. So I see movies and that's great, because sometimes I see movies I wouldn't otherwise see, and sometimes they're really great hits, and sometimes I'm like, was it necessary to even release this movie? And so I think that that's a thing, is I almost would prefer to have like less options, and maybe even rewatch movies, like get the chance to rewatch something because there's nothing else coming out, but I have my A-list still, versus just so much coming out where I'm like, well, I have to see everything, because I kind of am in a circle where people that know me know that they're like, hey, how was this movie? I know you saw it because it came out last night. And I haven't seen it yet. They're like, you haven't seen it yet? I had a friend who just said they saw the movie Sketch. And he's like, have you seen Sketch? And I was like, he's like, how have you not seen it yet? I was like, what came out on Wednesday? He's like, I saw something before you. And I was like, yeah, because I'm trying to prioritize because I want to see Strange Harvest as well, which I was going to go see last night, and then I got tired, so I'm going to try and go tonight. But it's also only playing at like where I live. It's only playing at like 9:30 p.m. at one theater and 10:30 at another theater, and that's just already late for me. And it's also hard to find because I have to balance it with like my work life. Like I want to see that. Whereas other bigger mainstream movies, they're in more theaters, they get more attention, they get more box office, they get more buzz, so they're able to stay around longer. When something like, I wanted to go see She Rides Shotgun last week. It was playing in like one theater, and then it didn't do super well in the box office. So this week it's playing in the same theater, but at one showtime, and it's like 12 p.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm like, I can't go at 12 p.m. because I work. And so I was like, well, I guess I've missed that movie when I maybe should have gone last week and then waited on Weapons and Freakier Friday, but then I wouldn't be able to. I don't want to miss the spoilers of Weapons, and I want to see it before spoilers, and so I think that's the thing, and so it's a hard balance with that. But anyways, that was a tangent, not about Weapons, but but I think that Weapons kind of falls into that mid-tier category of like we're looking at these kind of movies to see is theater sustainable.
Yeah. No. Yeah, and then we're going to wrap things up in a minute, but before we wrap things up, I do want to mention that I'm the same way. I see everything for free because I work at a movie theater, which, also isn't necessarily supporting the box office, I guess, but, it's fun. But I also, I definitely, it's working there has definitely helped me. I basically see everything, even stuff I wouldn't normally pay to see. So in a sense, it has been good for me personally as an actor to just see like different genres that I wouldn't typically see in the theater, at least. But yeah, like I feel like in the industry they're just not making good like original movies right now, and what they are putting out as original movies, they're just not taking the time to really develop them. Which, and bouncing off that point, I think a movie like Weapons, even if it's not like, if it's something you want to try, if it's not like the type of movie you would necessarily see, like me personally, it's the type of movie I feel like should be seen at least for the first time in the theater, especially like in a crowded theater, just for like the scares and everything, just to get the reactions of people. There's certain movies like that I feel like are good to see in theaters, even if they do come out on streaming in like a month or two, as opposed to like a year, which happened in like when we were younger. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And then to wrap up, before we rate the movie, I wanted to get your opinion. With Zach Greger, personally, I feel like across like Barbarian, Companion, even though he didn't direct that, and Weapons, I feel like he did a pretty good job of like mixing comedy and horror, because there were a lot of comedic moments in all three movies.
I agree.
And I thought for the most part they worked pretty well. Some cases maybe not. And sometimes in other movies it's hard to like mix the two and do it well. And I feel like for the most part he does a pretty good job with it. So I just wanted to get your quick thought on that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I honestly was pretty surprised that Weapons had comedy in it, because it didn't feel like a movie that would be funny. But I do think, like, I think everything, there was like one, I don't remember even what it was, but people were laughing so hard, and I was like, all right, I'm over. Like, I get it. I get the joke. It's over. But I do think that what's nice about his movies is that you get the suspense, but then I think there's just a sprinkling of comedy that gives us some release. But it doesn't feel like it's like this like gag that's like taking you out of it. It's still relevant to what's happening because it's so kind of weird and bonkers. So I agree with you on, I think that balance and that blend is really nice, because he knows how to enhance through comedy versus throwing comedy into just be like, oh, that was so funny, here's a funny joke. It's like, oh, that's funny, that's so odd, it's so absurd, because he does it through like character situations and like through dialogue and story, that it's not, it kind of blends in, which I really like. It enhances the story versus making it like a separate genre. It's not like a horror comedy, but it's just blending some comedic elements into the horror, which I think really works. So I agree with you on that.
Like, I think my favorite part about Barbarian was when Justin Long found the dungeon, and then his first thought was not, "Oh, what is this place?" It was like, "Ooh, more real estate space." Stuff like that, and it fit in with the character, and it helped. It
Yeah.
didn't make the movie feel like, "Oh, that was what was that?"
Oh, yeah.
It worked well.
It worked so well.
Stuff like that, I think is great, and Zach Gregor, I think, does a great job with that. So I hope he keeps doing movies like this, where he keeps having those combined elements. I think
Yeah, I agree.
work really well. So to wrap things up, rating Weapons out of 4 stars. What would you rate it?
I think during this podcast, I've had my ups and downs with it. I think I'd give it, I don't know, like 2.5 stars. I think for me it's very like there's a lot of great things, and then there's a lot of things that I just really didn't work for me. But I think 2.5 stars feels fair, and I think upon another rewatch, it could drop to 2 or it could go up to 3. So I'd say 2.5.
I'd probably give it 2. I did think it was a great movie. I enjoyed it more, like I said probably a million times in this episode, I'm not a huge horror fan, so like going into it, I was like, going into any horror movie, I feel like for me, I'm probably not gonna love it, but I'll still watch it just because I want to watch it.
Sure.
But I enjoyed most of it. I think we had a lot of similar issues with the movie, so that's probably why I'm gonna give it 2 stars. I thought the performances were great. The shots, cinematography, the comedic horror balance, I really enjoyed. Just the plot holes, the unanswered questions.
I agree.
Why I'm giving it such a low rating. But overall, I didn't think it was terrible. Would I rewatch it? Definitely not in theaters. I don't want to get scared again on the big screen, but I'll definitely rewatch it. It's not something I wouldn't ever rewatch. It's probably just not something I would be intrigued to be like, oh, hey, do you want to watch a movie? Let's watch Weapons. But if it was on, I would definitely watch it.
Sure, that makes sense. Cool.
So thank you so much for joining me today, and hopefully we'll have you on again.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, it was a great talk today. Hey everyone, thank you for watching today's episode of Cinema Safari, where we talked about Weapons. Spencer, great guy, great conversation. He had a lot of knowledge about the genre, just movies in general. Seems to love movies as much as I do, so it was a great talk. And hope to have him on again pretty soon, sooner rather than later. It would be fun to talk to him again about more content going forward. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Comment about Weapons, Zach Gregor's other movies. It's great to hear your opinions of the movies, what you liked, didn't like. And follow us on Instagram, Twitter, we're at Cinema Safari 25, Instagram, Cinema Safari Podcast. Like our posts, watch our posts, comment if you want to see certain things in future episodes, if you have opinions of stuff we've talked about in previous episodes, and we would just love to hear your feedback. So thank you all for watching, and thank you for your support. We will see you all on the next episode.